Alright, so the framing is all complete. I've got the vapor barrier installed and the vents installed. It's time to put on the fascia and the trim around the doors. So in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what I did to get those things taken care of. But before I start, I noticed a problem. My little short walls by my doorways only had one anchor bolt put in them, and as a result, they were really loose. Even though these anchor bolts were cranked down tight, they would still weeble wobble. So to fix this, I had to drill a second hole using a hammer drill down through the concrete, and then I installed these anchors. These are expansion anchors that all you have to do is pound them down into the concrete, and then put a couple washers over and crank that bolt down, and the flange at the bottom expands to fill up that hole and make a real tight connection. One other quick housekeeping item, I had these pieces of OSB left as part of my gussets on the end gables. Had to just trim that out real quick, and then I could get going. So this started by just measuring carefully around the openings that I needed to trim. I started with the one above the door, measured that, and then cut out the piece to length. Now in this video you're going to see me using a lot of clamps to hold things because I was working alone. This is much faster if you have somebody else there to help, but if you don't, a couple of clamps will get you what you need. So using the clamps, I'd put up the pieces, and then I would check them to make sure that they were level. Once I had all three trim pieces put in around the door and verified everything was level, I came back with the nail gun and nailed them in. Now the doors were easy. The fascia was significantly more difficult. See, these boards are 16 feet long, and they're not real heavy, but they're really awkward to use just because of how long and kind of floppy they are. So I used kind of the same approach, where I would attach one end of the board as tightly as I could with a clamp, and then I'd walk down to the other end of the board and very slowly and carefully lift it up until it was in approximately the correct position. Once it was up there, then I put a clamp at that end as well. Now this is not ready to nail in yet. It needs to be adjusted a little bit, so I came back to the first end, loosened the clamp a little bit, adjusted the board down where it needed to be, and the main goal here is to make sure that it is going to be down below the roof line, but only just barely. There's going to be a drip edge and shingles that go over the top of this and extend out beyond it, and this just makes sure that the trim is not going to get in the way. Once I had it placed exactly where I wanted it, then I was ready to clamp it up there for realsies this time, and then shoot a single nail at one end. Just one nail to start. And I only do one nail because now I can go down to the other end and do the same process. Loosen the clamp, check to make sure that it's going to clear the drip edge and the shingles, and then put in one nail. And now that both ends are nailed where they need to be, then I can put in two nails about every foot or so, the entire length down. Once the big long piece was put in, then it was time to do the shorter piece. Much simpler because it was so small. Just hold it up there by hand and get it aligned where I needed it, and just shoot it home with some nails. Now some of these nails didn't sink quite all the way, so I grabbed my nail punch and used that to sink them just a little bit below the surface. You'll see why this is important when I cover how to caulk and seal your shed. Now the next pieces of fascia were more difficult to put in, mostly because I was standing on the top of a ladder and it was a little bit difficult to balance. I started by cutting them to the correct length, and then again putting them up with clamps. While they were clamped in exactly the right position, then I came and used a pencil to mark the back side at the lowest corner, because this is going to need to be trimmed off just a little bit. I cut that off camera, and then I was ready to install it. Again with the clamps. And you can see the bottom corner has been cut off just a little bit now. And that's so that the bottom corner perfectly matches the bottom edge of the fascia on the edge of the shed. Again, put one nail at one corner, then go adjust the other corner, and finish nailing it off. Now there's one more detail I want to cover, and that is down at the bottom of these corners. I was a little concerned about them separating. So I grabbed some little finish nails, and I drove 2 nails in down near the very bottom edge, and this will just help make sure that they stay lined up and that nothing tends to spread or split over time. As with all the other nails, I did go ahead and make sure that these were sunk just below the surface a little bit, so that when I came by to seal them, that they would seal well. Now the next part involves this little diamond. This is a shot of the side of my house, and at the top of each of the peaks of the roof, it has this little diamond shape, and I wanted to mimic that in the shed. I didn't really have plans for how exactly to do this, and I couldn't get up there to measure it, so I had to just kind of eyeball some things. So I grabbed a piece of trim and sketched out what I thought was going to be about the right proportion. Now the thing to keep in mind when you're doing a diamond shape like this is you want to make sure that the sides are symmetrical, otherwise you'll wind up with 2 corners that don't line up quite right. And so as I was cutting this really carefully on the saw, I checked it with my square to make sure that the kind of the shoulders of the diamond were going to be in exactly the same elevation. And then as soon as I was done cutting out the whole thing, I double checked the measurements of each of the sides. The 2 short sides should be one length and the 2 long sides should be another length, and they all match. Rather than trying to remeasure, I just traced around the one that I'd already cut out and then cut that out exactly the same way. And now I have 2, one for each end of the shed, and they're a great match for each other. Now before I climb up on the top of a ladder, I thought I'd probably better go ahead and start the nails that I'm going to use to attach these to the shed. These are going to be just attached with 4 little finish nails and a little bit of construction adhesive on the back side. Just climbed up to the top of the ladder and drove those nails home, and I think it looks great. So that's all I'm going to cover in this video. Hopefully some of the tips that I've shared will be useful to you in your projects. If you find something that I'm doing that's completely wrong, I'd sure love to know about it. I like learning from you, hopefully more than you learn from me. And if you've enjoyed this video, why don't you reach on down there and hit that little subscribe button and maybe give me a little thumbs up. I'd sure appreciate it. And as always, thank you very much for watching.